Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to the November Recreational Astronomy Night meeting of the RASC Toronto Centre. My name is Paul Markov. I'll be introducing the speakers this evening. And we have a great lineup as usual. Talking first will be Andy Beaton presenting the sky this month, followed by Ed Treijs. And the title of his presentation is A Cruise in a Collection of Conjunctions. And finally, we'll have Chung talking about imaging emission nebula from your backyard with your DSLR or mirrorless camera. Thank you for coming down to the meeting on this winter-like evening, and hello to our viewers on YouTube. I would like to remind our speakers to please limit the number of acronyms, and if you do use acronyms, to explain what they are. And also would like to find out by show of hands who is here for the first time, new member or not. Thank you. And thank you for turning on the light there. I was in complete darkness here, completely blinded by these spotlights. All right, and before we get to the speakers, I'd like to invite Blake Nancaro to present an observing certificate to one of our members.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Blake Nancaro, and I'm, along with being a volunteer in a lot of activities in the Toronto Centre, I'm on the National Observing Committee. There are about 20 people across the country that volunteer on this committee and do various things, but it's my honor this evening to recognize one of our Toronto Centre members for just one of few accomplishments in recent history. And this certificate that I'm presenting this evening goes to Nick Pierre. Come on down, Nick. And Nick, here's the certificate. Congratulations on that. And also from the National Office, there's a very nice pin, metal pin, enamel. So Nick's done an amazing thing here in that he submitted actually at the same time 3 certificates. So we'll recognize the other 2, but this is the Explore the Universe certificate, which is sort of a basic program. It covers all kinds of objects, planets, double stars, constellations, and so on. But he also completed his Messier certificate. That's all the 110 objects in that, and also the finest new general catalog or finest NGC objects. So he did all of those, and both Adrian Aberdeen and I reviewed his log notes, and we're very pleased with what we saw. So congratulations, a tremendous effort, and we're really proud of what you've done. And I invite, yes. And I invite all members, if you're relatively new to it, to consider this, to pursue the certificate programs. They're nice challenges, and they get progressively harder, but it gives you targets, things to work for, and so on. And keep good log notes, and send them in to us. So thanks again. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. It was fun doing it. Fun doing all 3 of them. Picture? And thank you to Blake and Adrian for going through all the logs and everything like that. It can be a bit of a task, but it took even longer to do them all. But yes, thank you. Sorry. Yes, I was just saying thank you to Blake and Adrian for going through the logs and being on the observing committee. I really appreciate them going through all my stuff and giving my certificates for my 1 out of 3 that's coming. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, and congratulations again, Nick. And I'll call on Andy Beaton to present this guy this month.
Man, that is an intimidating set of spotlights, isn't it? Hi, I'm Andy Beaton. I'm here to talk about the sky this month for the next month, from here to the next recreational meeting. We've got the usual things I like to talk about, the big picture of what's up in the sky, planetary highlights, lunar highlights. I've thrown in some nearby galaxies as something extra fun to look at, comets and meteors, I like variable stars. Blake likes double stars. And whatever else is going on in the sky. So starting with the big picture, this is the sky more or less tonight, not far off this time. We haven't got anything really spectacular to look at here. We've got our usual fall constellations. Way down at the end there, we've got some planets. Saturn is still peeking over the horizon just a little bit. Neptune and Uranus up there. All the usual, there's the big square of Pegasus and all the deep sky stuff around there. If we head out in the sky in a month, late in the morning, this is what the sky is going to look like the morning before the next meeting. We've got Mars showing up just on the eastern horizon. Whoop, that's not what I wanted to do. Mars down there. Other than that, not much planetary action to look at. But we've got all the spring constellations already coming up if you're waking up early or staying up very late. The comment has already been made that what I should actually show you is a big blank screen and say you're going to be looking at clouds for the next month, but I'd like to be optimistic. So it's standard time. Don't tell my wife, but I'm actually happy about it. I like it when it gets dark early because we get extra observing time in. Tonight, twilight ends around 6:15. Starts again at 5:12 in the morning, and this is accurate because I didn't have to do any conversion to daylight savings time. By the end of this month, twilight will be ending at 5 after 6, and starting again at 5:42 in the morning. So we've got great big long nights, and not only that, but we've got early nights, so you can get out and start observing right after dinner or even before dinner. You know, get some variable stars observed before you go in for the hockey game, and you know, take advantage of the fact that you know, the darkness is here and we're stuck with it. So what's coming up? The new moon's on the 26th. Everybody is going to care about that. Assuming it's clear, we'll get our best deep sky observing then. Moon is at apogee on December 5th and perigee on November 23rd. If you have a camera and you're interested in performing the experiment, take a picture of the moon on each of those dates and put the two pictures side by side and compare the size and get an idea of just how elliptical the moon's orbit is. It's a nice simple experiment that anybody can do, and if you've got kids, it's a good experiment for them too. November 18th, we have the Leonid meteors coming along. They'll be going on for a couple days before and after, but the 18th will be the peak. On November 28th, the Moon and Jupiter are going to pass very close together, followed by the Moon and Saturn on the 29th. On both of these occasions, it's going to be quite low to the horizon. I don't think you're going to get any super amazing observing done, but there'll be nice attractive pairs for pictures or for dragging your friends out to take a look at the moon and some planets. We have the moon coming up first quarter on December 4th. This is a cool month because there is no full moon between now and the next meeting. The next full moon won't happen until the night after the meeting on the 11th, so enjoy this. This is going to be the greatest dark sky month of your entire life. Last quarter, November 19th, new moon on the 26th. The lunar X is on December 4th, and that's at 1:44 in the morning. For those who don't know, the lunar X is a pair of craters situated in such a way that when the light's coming from a certain angle, it looks like there's an X on the moon. It's kind of cool. We have an occultation of ZC 976 on November 16th by the moon. There are actually a few occultations of stars going on by the moon in this month. I've just put this one into the notes, mostly to draw your attention to the fact that your Observer's Handbook has all kinds of these listed in it. You can dig in there and find cool occultations. It's very interesting to see a star disappear or reappear on the dark limb of the moon. And if you're extra precise and feel like getting involved, there's actual useful scientific data that can be gathered here. Professional scientists care very much for minor variations in the orbit of the moon, and this is one of the ways they get tracked. So if you feel like doing some science, this is your big chance. So planets. Mercury is going to be up in the morning. It's actually one of the best opportunities for the next few months to see Mercury. On the 28th, it'll be at its greatest elongation, which means it's going to be way up in the sky by Mercury standards, which is not very much. But if you haven't seen it, and very many people haven't, it's a good time to go out and give it a try, especially if you have a good eastern horizon. Venus is very low on the western horizon after sunset. It's not appearing very well this month. Mars is going to be appearing in the morning sky, but it's on the opposite side of the sun from us, so it's going to be very small. You're not going to see a lot of detail. You might see the red color, but it's not going to be an optimal time to go looking for it. The big planets. Jupiter is sinking into the western horizon at sunset, and Saturn is following it closely behind. They are, like they've been all year, at a low declination, so if you are out observing, you're not going to be able to see an awful lot of detail. But there's always interesting stuff to see. You'll see the stripes on Jupiter, you'll see the rings, you'll see the moons. I wouldn't go out observing them to do any professional quality observing, but if you've got friends and family who've never seen either of the big planets, it's always a good idea to take them out and impress them. They'll still be worth seeing for that. The ice giants are probably our best planets to look at for this next month. They're both way up in the evening sky. Uranus is in theory visible to the naked eye. I've never actually seen it naked eye, but the numbers are there. Moons of both planets are interesting targets. I mean, the problem is neither of the planets are very interesting in themselves to look at. We don't get to see any weather patterns or stripes or belts or anything on them with any equipment we have here. But the moons are worth tracking, especially Uranus, if you can manage, because Uranus is face on to us instead of edge on, so you'll get to see all the moons at once, in theory, all the ones that are visible to us. But if you've got non-astronomers who are looking for exciting things to see, get them out early to see Jupiter and Saturn, because to be honest, these guys are kind of boring to look at. The minor planets, god damn, I thought I fixed that. That should be Eris, not Ellis. Pluto's in Sagittarius. It's pretty much hopeless. There are too many stars there. It's too close to twilight. It exists. If you happen to get a picture around then, you might be able to pick it up. Ceres is pretty close to Jupiter, but it's not going to be bright enough to really be noticeable. It's kind of lost its charm for the next few months. Eris is in Cetus, 18th magnitude minor planet. I'm sure there's somebody in here who has seen an object that dim. And actually, I am curious, and I'll check on the YouTube comments in a few days to see if anyone else has chimed in, but what is the dimmest object anyone here has actually seen or imaged? If anybody wants to shout out, 14th magnitude is about the dimmest I've seen. Anybody? I know someone's seen less than that.
I've tagged quasars.
How dim, do you know? 15, 16? Okay. Anybody seen anything dimmer than that, or seen something dimmer than that in an image? Oh, okay. I didn't hear that. Anyway, I would be curious about what people have or haven't seen. I mean, I've brought up Eris here at 18th magnitude on the assumption that somebody somewhere in the Toronto Centre has facilities to see something or image something that dim. And I'd be curious to know if it's true or whether I'm actually just wasting my time. This afternoon, after I submitted this, I discovered that there is yet another minor planet in our range, the asteroid Hygeia. Currently not too far away from the Pleiades. It's about 10th magnitude in Taurus, and there's evidence to suggest that it is in fact not just an asteroid, but meets all the criteria to be a minor planet as well. And that one's going to be a nice easy one to find, at least as easy as Ceres. So keep an eye on that. Check your home planetariums and see if you can find it. I like to throw in a bit of deep sky stuff just to give people an idea of what they can be looking for. Usually the beginners find more use from this, but I always like to throw some extra details in for the experienced people. I'm looking at nearby galaxies this month. M31, the Andromeda galaxy, obviously, it's almost too obvious. Triangulum I thought was the more interesting one to dig into this month. M31, it's also got 14 satellite galaxies, so if you're interested in racking up a score of interesting targets, two of them, M32 and M110, are pretty bright, and if you've done your Messier list, you've seen them, but the other 12 are probably more challenging or interesting targets. Both galaxies have tons of globular clusters around them. I've seen one globular cluster around M31. It was about 13th magnitude, but with a slightly larger telescope than my 8-inch, you should be able to see plenty more. There was a Sky and Telescope out a few years ago that actually provided a map for finding the globular clusters around M31, and I'm certain now that we have modern planetarium software, it should be a much easier thing to track down. M81 and M82, also pretty close, not conveniently placed in the evening, but if you wait till later in the morning, Ursa Major should be rising further up in the sky, and you should get a better look at them. So M33, the Triangulum galaxy, large and brightish by galaxy standards. You can actually see it naked eye in sufficiently dark skies. I've seen it in about 200 miles from Toronto. That's far enough away to be able to actually see without the city glow ruining everything. It does have things visible within it. You can see star clusters and hydrogen clouds in a moderate-sized telescope. NGC 588, which is a hydrogen region, is 13.5 magnitude. That's within reach of a modest telescope. And there's a picture, and there's that big H2 region, and up here we see some huge star formation regions that should be visible with a reasonable telescope as well. It doesn't have a very big core, which kind of indicates it doesn't have a very big supermassive black hole at its center, but an interesting target nonetheless. Unfortunately, the nature of galaxies is if you're observing in the city, you're going to have a tough time with it. So this is really something where you want to get as far away from the city lights as possible. So we have some comets and meteors coming up. The Leonids are peaking on the 18th. Those are the big ones. I think if it's clear, we'll all be out in our backyard seeing what we can see. after our next meeting on December 14th, the Geminids will be peaking, but we may see some early ones. So if you're out observing, I wouldn't go looking specifically for Geminids before the next meeting, but if you're out, you may see them just being there and seeing what's coming along. We have a couple lesser meteor showers, meteor dribbles, the South and North Taurids, both long-term meteor showers. They're running for months. You're only getting 5 or 10 meteors an hour out of them, but there's a high proportion of fireballs. So if you happen to be out observing and you see a fireball, see if you can trace the radiant back to Taurus and identify it as one of those. We have some comets, not very exciting ones. 10th magnitude is the best we've got right now. These are all the comets visible in the northern hemisphere brighter than 12th magnitude. So it's not a great collection. I don't think you'll be seeing comet tails or anything out of them, but they're there, and if you like looking at comets, and who doesn't, then you've got targets to look for. We can't go a month without a variable star. Z Andromedae is the one I've picked this time, and it's interesting for a number of reasons. It's the prototype for the entire class of variable stars. It goes from 7.7 to 11.3 magnitude, so you can see it when it's at its brightest with a pair of binoculars. Any telescope should be able to get good observations of its brightness. It's an interesting one. It's one of those stars where you get a white dwarf and a red giant orbiting around each other. And the white dwarf is pulling material off the red giant, which forms an accretion disk around the white dwarf that periodically ignites. Now this one's kind of cool because it has some extra twists in there. The accretion disk is warped, and the two stars are eclipsing each other from our point of view, so you get all kinds of weird brightness effects. Now this is a good star for human beings to observe. There's an awful lot of automated telescope programs that are doing the variable star data collection, but they tend to get images every 2 to 3 days over the entire sky. Cataclysmic variables like Z Andromedae, they tend to go a lot faster. They tend to go into outburst over the space of a couple hours. So the way they get caught is we get astronomers like ourselves around the world checking up on it whenever we can. With enough people, whenever it goes into outburst, someone is going to catch it, report it to the database immediately, and the professional astronomers who care about this star or its type will immediately be warned that there's data ready to be collected. So this is another opportunity for science for you and I. One of the reasons I love doing variable stars. For double stars, I've just gone for cheap and flashy this time. Gamma Andromedae, it's right overhead in the evening, and this is one of those Albireo type stars where you get two bright companions with obviously different colors, and they're pretty far separated, so any telescope should be able to split them apart, and you'll be able to see the contrast between the two. This is one the handbook gave 3 exclamation marks. And I'm actually going to recommend that you take a look at that section of the handbook. It lists a whole bunch of double stars with different colors, and this is one of the best of them. So what's coming up in spaceflight? We've got a couple missions carrying supplies to the ISS. Soyuz Progress, followed by a Falcon 9 Dragon. Keep an eye on the Falcon, see if it's going to be one of the landing missions or whether it's just going to crash into the sea when they're finished with the booster. A controversial one here, Falcon 9 launching 60 more Starlink satellites. Some people are really pleased that phone or internet service will be provided all over the world. Some people are annoyed that Elon Musk is going to be putting up more Starlink satellites than there are visible stars. So it's happening anyway. You can at least be aware of that. Hayabusa 2 is returning to Earth with samples from the asteroid it was landing on. And from now until November 20th, from November 20th until the next meeting, the ISS is going to be passing in the early evening. And as always, heavensabove.com will have the time for your own personal location. And because it's going to be cloudy, I've dug up some projects for citizen scientists on zooniverse.org. This is one of those things where they've asked the public to help in analyzing the vast quantities of data they have out there in the electronic world. One project is taking images from the Hubble Space Telescope and searching for asteroids as yet undiscovered, especially ones that are going to be approaching the Earth. This is something that's very valuable for the future of the human race. Another project, searching for a clumpy structure in galaxies. It seems that the structure of galaxies, in particular clumps of stars, varies between older and newer galaxies, and they want your help in gathering the data to do that. And there's another project which is near and dear to my heart, identifying variable stars in the center of the galaxy. They've got a whole bunch of images in the infrared of stars around the center of the galaxy, stuff that has never been seen before, and they've noticed that a lot of them are varying. And they would like your help in measuring the variability, finding the variable stars, and gathering data for the scientists to work with. And that's what we have for this month. And are there any questions?
Any questions?
Ron.
The Lunar X on December 4th at 1:44 a.m. How many hours before and after do you kind of have to look at it?
I think it's about half hour each way.
And
more than that? Okay.
More than half an hour? Okay. And does it say you were in South America? Could you see it the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The moon will look the same to us no matter where we are on the Earth. It's not something that's going to rely on perspective.
I was wondering if the shadows might be different from that perspective or something.
No, it'll be the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Not so much a question. I heard somebody say that there's a moment when Jupiter, that we can't see on the other side of the Earth, has all four moons either behind Jupiter or over the front. So I don't know whether it's past or coming soon, but it would be neat to see or not see.
Okay, yeah, that's probably worth checking into your observer's handbook and see if it says anything about four occultations or something like that.
To answer Ron's question, that was last Saturday.
Okay. The good news is it didn't destroy the Earth.
I looked up my life list notes. So visual, I've seen magnitude 16.1. Those are
Okay.
quasars.
Excellent.
And that is with Ian Wheelban's big 20-inch Dobsonian.
Okay.
Photographically, using the Burt Gaffney Observatory in Halifax that anybody can use for free, I've imaged down to magnitude 19.2.
19.2, that's a good round number, yeah. Okay, cool. Anybody else want to try and beat that? All right, thank you very much.
Good evening. So my presentation this evening, when I first proposed it to Paul Markov, I was going to call it Stuff, and he kind of objected to that. So I decided to go with the alliteration with a bunch of C's in there. But you know, in another sense, it's actually stuff that I did this summer, I looked up this summer in connection with actually Toronto Centre, various sorts of things, and you'll see how they kind of tie together, I hope. So the first thing is if you've logged into our website or gone to our public website, you might have seen this funny logo up there and wondering what that is all about. So I'm going to do a little bit of a review of what we did with this OSTC, which is Owen Sound Transportation Company, and their ferry. We actually did some outreach. I was up there on the August long weekend, and then Ralph and Tom Luton were up there for the Perseids, but the Perseids were mooned out, so that's why they also had the August long weekend. So some quick facts or background information. Cheechimon sails between Tobermory, which is at the very top of the Bruce Peninsula, and South Baymouth on Manitoulin Island. One-way crossing is a bit under 2 hours. It might be an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 3/4. I didn't actually time it very well, but if it leaves Tobermory at 8, it's back at Tobermory at midnight, which I experienced firsthand. Tobermory is a long way away. It's further away than I thought. It's 160 kilometers from the CAO, and it's 311 kilometers from right here, the Ontario Science Centre. That's by the shortest Google route. So it's almost as far away as Windsor. So it's a pretty long trip, and a lot of it's on 2-lane highways that it can get pretty crowded. The long August weekend is their Christmas rush season. So if you go up there to actually look around and see things, it's probably not the best weekend. For instance, you might have heard of Bruce National Park, which has grottos and things on big water caves on Georgian Bay. Well, the parking lot was completely full. I drove past there and the sign said, yeah, don't even bother coming here. The campgrounds would be full, the motels would be full, everything is full up. So, well, it's a very nice place to visit. Everyone's there on the August weekend, probably passing through. So what I did is I did 3 evenings of outreach, Friday, August 2nd through Sunday, August 4th. And I got just a few pictures. I'm not going to do a travel log, just give you some ideas of what it looks like and how it worked. So first of all, we did a little bit of a presentation in the ship's lounge. It's a fairly large vessel, so I did a bit of a presentation giving orientation, and I've excerpted these few slides here just to give you an idea why we actually do outreach there. So it's dark skies. There's a map of light pollution. So I talked about light pollution to the people in the lounge and explained that we're going to some place where it's dark. Most people live in cities. Cities are big. You can't see a whole lot. That's kind of a general map showing light pollution in eastern North America especially. And this one actually, you can see, let's see if I can get this pointer. There's Tobermory, and Manitoulin Island is kind of hidden away back there. So I just kind of clicked arbitrarily on a point in the middle of the crossing. It kind of goes across up that way. And you can see, if you know your sky quality reading, 21.99 or 22 is pretty dark. And Bortle is class 1, which is the darkest sky that you can get. So it's a pretty dark location. So again, this is what I presented. Even the Bruce Peninsula, or the North Bruce Peninsula Tourist Association, talks about the dark skies. It is a dark sky community, so they try to take care of lighting. If you're in Tobermory, it's still pretty bright, and there are street lights, but you get out of the towns of Tobermory or Lions Head, which are pretty much the only 2 places up there, it is also pretty dark. So the Tourist Association is onto this. They're encouraging this. They're probably working with the Owen Sound Transportation Company. So it's nice to do outreach where the community is actually behind you and they realize the benefits, tourist benefits, and basically the benefits to their residents. That's our observatory, obviously, but that's a lot closer to Collingwood. There's actually a clear sky clock, which is the way astronomers use to check whether it's going to be cloudy or not. It's probably all white for Toronto right now, but it's actually already set up at the Cheecham-on 1/3 way point, which is out in the lake, so I checked every night. The one problem that we had, that one obviously is a pretty clear one. I forget which night it is, but every night we had the forest fire smoke and the transparency was reduced. So even though there might not have been any clouds, it wasn't as transparent as it could have been, but there's not a heck of a lot you can do about that. So that's what the ship looks like, or the back part. I didn't actually take pictures with the idea if I'm going to do a presentation, so what pictures I have. All the outreach is done up on that back deck. So you're viewing to the stern of the boat. The boat is heading south when we do the outreach, so you're looking basically more or less to the north. Well, it's kind of going maybe southeast. So you can get pretty much the entire horizon by moving, but the funnel obviously is in the way. This is a picture from up on the top, up on the deck. And that's looking back over the stern of the boat from that same top deck. That's underway at some point, obviously. Actually, that's probably Atacama Desert dust. It's not the lens. It's on the imaging chip. Yeah, you'll always see those little spots. So outreach for kids, anybody? It kind of belongs to, it should go without saying, but they do have multiple signs like that all over the railing. I can only presume it's Instagram or something like that, hey, because where that is, it's not very obvious, but you're about 4 or 5 stories up over a very deep, cold lake, and the ship is moving right along, and there are big waves. So if you fall in, it is really not good for you or for your kids. So there's departing Tobermory at 8 p.m., just the shot I took one evening. Tobermory's in the back there in the big dock. The Cheecham-on's a car ferry, and it carries something like 70 or 80 cars. I forget exactly how many, but it's quite the lineup. Arriving South Baymouth, maybe at 9:45 p.m. It's getting dark already because this is in August. And it's not a great shot. It's just what I grabbed with the camera. This next thing, I couldn't quite get the animation working, but let's see how it is. So people have heard of the green flash when the sun sets over a really distant horizon, like over water. Maybe the last little bit of the sun turns an emerald, apparently, flashing. So I actually had that horizon one evening, so I took some pictures and nothing. No, trust me. Whatever the camera is showing you, I went, is that all? Are you telling me that's green? Nah, it's not the emerald. It's supposed to be spectacular emerald. Forget it. Anyway, if someone else wants to try, go on the boat and have a look for yourself. Okay, so my impressions of the outreach, it was quite a bit of fun. 30 plus people present in the lounge to give the presentation. I didn't actually have a chance to count them. I'm not very diligent that way, but I was also talking to a lot of people because you don't have very much time between when the boat gets underway from South Baymouth, which is 10 o'clock, and people have to make their way up to the deck. And then you don't really have that much time to get out and actually look at the stars, which is the whole point of it. It was dark. In the Bortle 1 class, you'll see some of the things like, the Milky Way throws a shadow. Not quite. But they do say in the Bortle 1 that clouds will be like black holes in the sky. So unlike when it's over Toronto, where you see clouds and they're kind of brighter than the background sky, there they were actually like, are there no stars there, or is there a cloud there? You couldn't actually see the clouds, just the absence of stars. That's pretty cool. Lots of interested people. Questions didn't stop until we were docking. Really common question was, can you show me where Gemini is, or can you show me where Aries is? And I could get some of them, but obviously any winter zodiac constellations were out of scope. Challenging, it's noisy. You're right behind the funnel of a big diesel engine. So they did give a clip-on mic and a portable speaker, and I was still hoarse at the end of each session. The plume from the stack kind of is in almost the same direction as the Milky Way, which is a little disappointing, but the Milky Way is a little offset, but yeah, it's not perfect. Smoke from forest fires, as I mentioned before, the transparency wasn't that great. And people asked me if I was a professional astronomer. And that's not after the show, like, are you an astronomer? No, they asked at the start, and they sometimes seem disappointed when I say, no, I'm an amateur. But fortunately, I could turn around and say, well, I did do actually the astronomy role at the Ontario Science Centre years and years ago. So, you know, I've actually done this, yes, and I've studied in school. So, I don't know, do people get that question at other outreach events? Yes? Okay. I'd be curious as to how do people answer it the best. Obviously, if you have a telescope there, say, that doesn't matter, have a look through my telescope. And there were binoculars. So the Owen Sound Transportation Company purchased something like 12 or 13 image-stabilized binoculars, and we just handed them out to the people. And I would point out things that you could look at with the binoculars. I'm not positive how successful it is because it was really dark. You couldn't really see what they were doing. But they seemed pretty happy. And hopefully, and maybe Ralph can update us later, hopefully we will be able to go and do outreach with them again this year, next year, because I think they were pretty pleased. So, on to conjunctions. And this is where I'm going to switch to stellarium for the rest of it and kind of pop through a few interesting things. Did anyone catch this conjunction? You can see that all the 5 planets are visible. And that is from Toronto. What? Okay, so let's pop over to stellarium where you actually see when this happens and how I found out about this. And this is all part of my next story, which will tie in a little bit. So let's... Okay, great. So the mouse works. How do I get it full screen on here so I can actually work the control? Double click it. I'm gonna need the full control panel here. I have to be able to do the clock and everything.
Oh, well, you're gonna have to do it on the screen on here.
Is it actually doing that? Yes, it is. Okay, so my apologies. I'm going to be staring away from you a little bit. Sure. Okay, so actually the first thing I'm going to do is, nope. There, we're just going to stop time because we're going to be flipping around a bit. And by the way, Stellarium, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's free planetarium software. You can download it. You install it on your PC. I don't know if they make a Mac version or a Linux. Okay, so this is free software. I kind of like it. It's no problem. And you can do a lot of fun stuff, which I hope to illustrate. So here's our date and time window. And we are going to change things around a little bit. Oh, yeah, it's a little finicky. One, I have it all on notes because if there's a way of automating this, I don't know what it is. 2, 23, and we're going to run the time back to 1820 roughly. 25, that's fine. And we should, assuming, whoops, let's zoom out a little bit. There's your Saturn, Mars, Vega, and is there a time zone difference here? Okay, there's Mercury and Venus as well. So it's from 1942. And January, so I don't know. how many people would have seen it, because it was probably cloudy, and also for people who think, well, it would be cool to see it, these were also the darkest days of World War II. I looked at the Wikipedia page, and you can actually look up on Wikipedia what happened in January 1942, and not a lot of good things happened and a lot of bad things happened, so I don't really feel bad about missing this. And the reason how I found out about this is I was at the CAO, and I was looking through the old observer's handbooks, and I happened to randomly pull out the 1942 copy, and it said, there's a really good conjunction. And I went, oh, let's check that out in Stellarium, and in fact, it is a really good conjunction. I don't know how many others we've had between then and now that are this nice. To know, it's kind of hard to tell, I think, unless you really spend a lot of time looking around. And I'll explain why I was looking in a 1942 Observer's Handbook in a couple of steps. So next we're going to go to a conjunction which I think people should remember. It's 1942, was quite some time ago. It's not an easy way for it to handle dates, I think. 203, and I want to go to okay, and I want to be about 2130. 2130. Let's see if we've, oops. Oh, I think there's something funny with the time, but that's okay. And actually, so another thing I find quite useful is to go, especially when you're looking for Mercury, and some people like to look for Mercury, I don't know why, but what they do is you go to the landscape, instead of these pesky trees, that's the default thing, you can just go for ocean. It gives you a better horizon to actually see stuff down there. So if I run the time forward just a smidge, if people remember the triple conjunction that was visible in the evening, so this is May the 26th, and it's a little after 8 o'clock, and what happened was, if you went out over the months, the planets actually played kind of tag. Yeah, it was quite easy to see. Like I still have them fairly high up. And that is the first time that I knowingly saw Mercury. So I may have seen it before, and other people may have seen it on some of the times when it's really bright, especially in winter twilight, because it almost looks like a star, but you don't know what it is. But this one I'm going, okay, now I see the 3 different planets, and they played this. I saw it over several nights, and it was quite interesting. Right. Okay. So we'll move on to another conjunction that affected me and actually came to a little bit of fruition. That's 2015, 1025. So let's 2013, 14, 15, 10. Oops, 10, 25. And the time was about 5:40. Whoa, look at that. You can zip through a whole day in no time at all. Actually, so the time is not quite, I don't know what's going on. The time zone may be a little bit incorrect here. So I'm going to say this is what I want to show. So yeah, and I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to just try to adjust. So I went out early in the morning, and that was when Jupiter, Venus, and Mars were close together. Some people probably remember that. It was a pretty good sight early in the morning out until the end of the year, I think. And I went, okay, there's Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. And, there's Mercury, and what's so hard about spotting Mercury, except I'd been looking at Beta Virginis. And I only discovered that when I was very proud of myself. I went back inside, I fired up my stellarium and said, yeah, that's Mercury, and it went, nope. So The nice recovery was that I discovered that, in fact, Mercury does come a little bit later, and I went back out and I actually saw it. And that's kind of started my project to try to view Mercury, because I thought, well, if I could make a mistake like that, and it actually does take some effort, I'm going to try to get good at it. So because I've been doing that, I kind of won an award this year as well for observing Mercury and other planets. And looking through the Observer's Handbook, because the latest Observer's Handbook, and back for a few years, there's this little paragraph in the Mercury section that says most people have not seen Mercury. And I wanted to see how far back it goes and how the Observer's Handbook treated Mercury in earlier years. And that's why I was just pulling out random ones. And I came across that neat 1942 conjunction. So again, CAO and a bit of RASC thrown in there. So we're going to just pop over to the cruise, and I'm going to discuss a couple of the outreach things that I talked about there and we actually saw. So we are in Tobermory, so that's fine. I mean, the Toronto sky is not going to be that much different. Again, we go to the clock, so it was 2019 when I was out there. 2019, and it was month number 7, and well, I'm going to do it the lazy way. We'll call it the 3rd, and we'll run time up until it's kind of dark, which is when we were out there. Oh, okay. Thank you. When I write down dates, I usually write down the name of the month. So I'll put down August 27th, and then there's no arguing. So there's a couple of things in the sky. You start out by talking about, and let's just get a little bit of constellation lines here to orient you. So because it's an unfamiliar location, you start out talking where is Polaris and how to find it. So Polaris right there. But the most conspicuous star in the sky is Vega, and it's almost straight overhead, so no one misses Vega. And I know that a few months ago, Brian Charnick told us about some of his stories that he has about Vega, and it turns out I have a couple of stories that I like to pull out as well, but they are quite different. And the first little story is, let me just turn off the grids. And I'm going to turn on something else. I'm going to turn on so you can see Polaris up there, and Vega's over there. That's the celestial North Pole. So I've just thrown kind of a map on there, so as the stars turn, it all looks to turn around that point. So if, however, you decide to hang around for a little bit, let's see how this is going to work. Sure does. So if you hang around for another 11,000 and change years, you will see that Vega is very much the pole star and not Polaris anymore, because the Earth wobbles. I mean, it's not the stars moving, it's the fact that the Earth, like a top, wobbles and it points in different directions. And in the year 13,367, Vega becomes the pole star. So that's an interesting sort of thing to tell people and have them think about the fact that the sky does change, and there's some interesting phenomena that aren't obvious right away. And just for this presentation, well, actually, the other interesting fact about Vega is if you hang out for even longer than that, like 270,000 years or so, Vega, according to Wikipedia, will become the brightest star in our sky, because the Earth's solar system is kind of generally moving in the direction of Vega, and I guess it will be moving away from Sirius, which is currently the brightest star. So Vega will pass Alpha Centauri and Canopus, which are the other 2 stars that are quite bright. And it will become the brightest star in the sky. Whether it will be close to the pole at that point, I have no idea. Stellarium doesn't go that far. However, there's one other thing that I thought I would learn about and do tonight. So we're going to do a little bit of fun. We're going to go to the year, Can I do that? I know it's possible. Well, toot. There we go. So if we zoom in, and this is the year 2711 before the Common Era, or BC, there is a pole star there, and you might have heard about it. The star Tuban, which is a star in the constellation Draco. And I think this is actually mentioned in ancient texts as being a pole star that was used way back then. Now, it was at its best around this time, where I'm pretty sure there are not going to be that many ships navigating the Mediterranean or anywhere else. That's a little bit early. If we change this to maybe a time, the early Bronze Age, when there were more, like you can see, it's already moving away. So it was known to be not the greatest pole star, but that's what they had back in the Bronze Age, when I guess Homer and Odysseus were sailing around on the Mediterranean. And if we just turn on the grid, there it is. And the way you can point it out, if you do want to point it out and say, you know, in the future Vega will be it, and in the distant past Thuban was the pole star. Thuban is basically the bright star, like right after the pointer, instead of going, well, there, and then you just kind of go straight there, and it's the bright star, kind of the dipper distance that way. So that's another little interesting fact that you can throw out in outreach. Okay. Right, so if we go back to the cruise, because one other conjunction, but it's sprung from the cruise. I don't know whether I can type the negative, but fortunately I can roll it over like that. And we want 2, 0, 1. You can see the sky changes around quite a lot as you go through time because of the Earth's precession. Okay, so it was 8:03, right? I got my cruise time right? Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to turn off the constellation grid. So the other thing, and I'm going to just kind of pan back, the other thing was Jupiter was still very visible, right? It was hanging there over the horizon because of the kind of lack of transparency. It was very conspicuous. So someone asked a really good question, said, well, it's really low. Does it get higher? And I said, well, it's not going to get higher right now. It's right now where it is on the path. It follows, that is about the highest it gets, and then it sets. And it also follows the path of the sun. So, and it goes around the sun in 12 years. I mean, this is starting to get a little complicated. But I told them, look, right now it's where the sun is in winter, so it never gets very high. But if you wait like 6 years or so, it's going to be where the sun is in summer, and it's going to be quite a lot higher in the sky. And he went, oh, that's interesting. So when I got back to the hotel after doing the outreach, and this is like 12:30 in the morning, I said, okay, let's see what's happening. So what I did, 24, 25, let's pop back to, and let's just run time forward to the 16th, because, so what we have, and I'm going to run time back a little bit. So in January of 2025, which is only like 5 years and a little bit of change from now, there's Jupiter way up there in Aldebaran amongst the bright winter stars. And just kind of, so Jupiter is at magnitude minus 2.64, which is pretty darn bright. Over here we have Venus. It's setting, but it's still up there at minus 4.62, which is, I think, almost as bright as Venus gets. Beside it is Saturn, which isn't very bright, but it's there, and you can probably find it from Venus. And as a bonus, there's Mars, which isn't as good as the better appearances that we've had recently, and we will have in a few years. But at magnitude minus 1.37, it's almost as bright as the brightest star in the sky, which happens to also be visible, whoops, right there, as well as the bright star Capella, and you've got all these stars, and 2 bright planets and a couple of other planets over there. So I think that will be worth looking forward to, and it'll be a great naked eye object. I don't think that you'll be able to photograph it very easily, but if you figure out a way to do that, all power to you. And just to sum up, if you go, well, okay, that's 4 planets. Where's Mercury, the other traditional planet? Mercury does its own thing. So there it is. It's kind of hanging out in the morning sky. So it doesn't join the party. It says, hey, I'm going to hang out over here. So anyway, that's the collection of conjunctions and kind of working on questions that people ask. And it's kind of interesting things that you can tell people to look forward to. And I hope not only was this kind of interesting, made you look forward to some stuff, but also give you some more ideas for stories to give when you do outreach, because the more stories you have, the more people are going to actually ask further questions and sometimes inspire you or make you think about things that you may not have thought about. So that is pretty much my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Can you bring Saturn back into view there in a few hours?
Absolutely. Let's just run. This is the fun of Stellarium. Is you can. Oh, I was using this mouse.
Other way. Yeah. What doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It's going to be about in the same place. So
now.
Yes.
Now advance to March and zoom in on Saturn.
Ooh. Are you saying that there will be a nice close conjunction? Oops.
Go to March.
Sorry?
Go to March.
Right.
Right. A space bar and magnify.
Yep.
No.
Well, it should still be on Saturn.
March 2025?
Yeah.
Okay. If I can even see it on the keyboard.
Different time of the day. Just change the hour.
Okay, to what?
Later, I guess.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I guess we're looking in.
Oh, where'd it go? Keep going. Hide the Earth then.
Sure.
It's easy. Go down to the bottom.
Oh, it's at the bottom? Well.
Yeah. Over. Back to the left. More. Left. There. Nope, beside there. There. Click that. Mm-hmm. All right, turn off the daylight.
Where do I turn off the daylight? You have
Go to
to
the
tell
right.
me.
Go to the right.
Okay.
Right there. All right. And center Saturn. No rings.
Well, while we're playing with the solarium there, why don't you go to 2020?
2020.
December 21st.
Sorry?
2020, December 21st.
Sure. 2020. December. Whoops.
And actually, it's perfect that you got Saturn there because
Whoops. Sorry, overshot it. Yes?
you just pull it back. Pull it back and make sure it's nighttime. Oh, there you go, right there. Two of them close together.
Ooh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Of course, there will be no clouds, right? Yeah. So it's fun to, I find it just fun to kind of poke around and see what you see, because you don't necessarily expect to see what you're going to see, and you go, hey, this is going to be neat. Yep.
Comment
Sure.
with regards to your cruise there. I've been on the Chichaman many years ago, and yeah, it's quite the adventure going up to the Manitoulin Island on it. Although one day, back, I don't know if it's the case now, but I went up there to do some camping, heading up to Gordon's Park. But when I got up there was no cab service. Yeah,
South Baymouth is, I actually went over once, I went over like a 2 trips early and walked around, there's not a heck of a lot up there. Like, if you have a pickup truck, you're good. You go places. They do have a cruise, like if you are actually at Tobermory and you found a place to stay, they do have an excursion one, which I think is a fairly cut rate. It's like $25, and it lets you go across and then come back on the same kind of in and out. You don't take your car, but you actually get the experience of being on a fairly large boat, which, like in Ontario, we're pretty landlocked. So,
Well, it was my first time up there, and like I said, I was heading up to Gordon's Park, so
Yeah.
I had no idea. But fortunately, there was a shopkeeper up there that was kind enough to give me a lift up to Gordon's Park. So it worked out.
that's the kind of place Manitoulin Island strikes me as being. Yeah.
A great place to see this sort of event is York Soaring. It has fabulous horizons, and I think Jeff Booth and some other people were at a session once, and we could see all 5 visible planets, well, 6 visible planets at the same time.
Right.
So,
the Earth was below you.
oh, yeah, of course, I'm counting that. I mean, that's an important planet.
Yeah. When you
But,
turn it off, it goes away.
we chose not to turn it off. Anyway, it's got fabulous horizons all the way around, and if there's an event like this where many planets are visible, it's worthwhile for the trip up because we do have permission to go.
Did you take your telescope with you?
No, I didn't. So on the boat, I think that Tom tried it with a Dobsonian. Did you try that? I didn't, because there's the binoculars, and trust me, on that deck it's so dark. The first time you come out of the lounge and go up there, I told people to stay. There's a funnel light, because if you go into the shadow, there are actually chairs there and garbage cans there. As I could have pointed out in the picture, you're going to walk right into a garbage can or a chair and whack your shin. Like, you see nothing. So setting up a telescope on a moving deck with no one seeing, not going there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me personally. Yeah.
The problem was not so much people not being able to see it. The problem was the vibration from the ship's engines was enough that even at low power, the idea of putting, say, the moon in a telescope wouldn't really work.
Yeah, I think it's dark enough there, and if you have a working laser pointer, and I had a bit of a struggle with it, but if you can point out enough things and people ask lots of questions, like I basically kept going until we were pretty much in the harbor, and I said, okay, this is it, we got to pack up, and because it's midnight and I really want to go to sleep at that point. Yes.
Hi. I attended a presentation at the Planetarium Winnipeg a number of years ago, and further to your point about the North Star being a different star 2,000 years ago or more.
Yeah.
Their theory was that the pyramids, which have a shaft that goes from the outside to an inner chamber, it was originally thought to be an air shaft, but actually they thought that it was aligned with the North Star at the time when the pyramids were built.
Well, so the interesting thing about that is, like if you're on Earth, it looks like the stars are moving around. But if it's aligned with the North Star, then it's still going to be aligned because our north does not change. So I'm not quite sure about that theory. So we think that, the stars are kind of doing this funny thing, but north will always be like that way. So it will look like, I'm kind of trying to describe it, but north will always be north. So if it's aligned with the North Star back then, it would still be just a different North Star. But if it was aligned with a different star, now we're talking because it won't line up anymore. As soon as you go away from north, the stars at a particular different direction will change constantly.
No, it no longer aligns with the North Star that we know to be the North Star. But they postulated that it aligned with the North Star at the time when the pyramids were built.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. Oh, sure. So everybody knows that, should I start from the very beginning, or here's good? Okay, sure. Okay. So imaging emission nebulae from your backyard with your DSLR or mirrorless camera. So everybody knows that in order to image deep space objects, you need to drive to a dark site a couple hours out of the city. And you need to bring a tracking mount, a big battery, a telescope, and a camera. And if you're auto-guiding, maybe a guide scope, guide camera, and a laptop. And if you're using a DSLR, then there's a whole bunch of tiny accessories that you'll have to bring that are really easy to forget. And the one you forget is probably the one that makes it impossible to do what you want to do, and you have to go home. And if you're not lucky, you might need coyote or bear repellent. And everybody also knows that you still have to get up in the morning and go to work after staying up all night or sleeping in your car, because clear skies don't care if it's a weekend or not. And one last thing, there's winter. So there's got to be a better way of doing this. And there is. You can actually image certain things like emission nebulae from your backyard or front lawn in Toronto by using a method called narrowband false color imaging. And that was how this was done. This is back in November 2010 from my front door. It's M1, Crab Nebula. It's 5 hours of hydrogen alpha data mapped to the red channel, and 3 hours of oxygen 3 data mapped to the green and blue. But the one problem with this method is you have to buy a dedicated astronomical camera and filters. And so there has to be also a more economical way of doing things, plus an easier way, because this takes hours and hours of processing afterwards too to produce this image. So there's got to be an easier way for the average amateur astronomer who's just interested in dabbling in imaging to produce an image like this from within the city. So the way that narrowband works, narrowband imaging, is that the filters allow a very narrow bandwidth of light to pass. And they usually allow the light to pass at characteristic wavelengths that is light that comes from emission nebulae. And these wavelengths are associated with a quantum change in electrons with the hydrogen atom, and we call that hydrogen alpha, and also most commonly too with the oxygen atom, and we call that oxygen 3 or O3. So because the bandwidth is so narrow, it's basically immune to the light pollution that we have in the city. So you can image deep in the city. So this company, STC, asked me to test one of their filters called the dual narrowband filter. And it passes at both these specific wavelengths. And so it allows you to collect data simultaneously for both red and green and blue on a commercial DSLR or mirrorless camera. So that really simplifies things. There are other filters very similar. There's the Optilong L Enhance, and there's also one called OPT Triad. Now the STC is a Taiwan company. Other well-known Taiwan telescope companies are Williams Optics, GSO, and Cinta, which owns Skywatcher and Celestron. Now to give you an idea of pricing, for a 2-inch filter, it's $400 US. The Optilong from China is a nice, reasonable $230. And the OPT Triad, which they advertise is 100% manufactured in the USA, it's eye-watering $1,100. So it would seem that the Chinese Optilong is the one to get, because they all perform about the same, from what I understand. But I'd just like to remind people, and I'm going to venture into an area where no RASC talk has ever gone. I just want to remind people about the political situation of this planet. China has 2 Canadian citizens. held hostage in prison as leverage for the Huawei affair. Hong Kong people have been demonstrating for months now for their lives and for democracy because China is reneging on a treaty that it negotiated with Great Britain and Hong Kong was handed back. And what people may not know is there's a Muslim population in China called the Uyghurs in the northwest part of the country. And millions of them are being interned in what China calls vocational training camps. So when you spend your money, you might want to think about, do you want to spend your money to support a rather odious regime? So I'll just leave it at that. So this is, thank you. So this is what the STC looks like. They have special versions called clip-in models, and they fit perfectly in your Canon or Nikon, in this case my Olympus camera. And this gives you the freedom to use your own lenses, so you don't really need to use a telescope, which might be more advantageous in some circumstances. So it goes right into the camera. And the first thing I did was I wanted to test the transmission profile of the filter and see if it's really as advertised. So I picked up this really ancient 1970s vintage spectrophotometer from a Penn State University surplus. And it was really cheap, it was like 40 bucks. And it was brand new, as you can tell. It even has the original D-cell batteries that run the unit, because it's a portable water testing unit. It's got all the reagents, so you can test and measure the concentration of whatever contaminants that you would find in the water sample. And as a result, because of that, the sample chamber is huge. And that's why I chose this model, because I don't have to modify it. It's big enough to slip those filters in and test them. Whereas typical spectrophotometers have really tiny chambers like this. So this is what I got for the transmission profile of the STC filter. This is what the website advertises as a transmission profile. That's the red part overlaid. And STC is quite good. They actually do a lot of quality control, and they test every filter before it leaves the factory. And that's what the quality control profile looks like. So any differences I would attribute to the fact that I've got an ancient spectrophotometer and maybe not be that well calibrated. So I think the specs that show up on the website are probably quite accurate for this filter. So the big question is, how does it perform? Well, this is M42 as you would see it about 3 o'clock in the morning without any filters, just camera in the telescope. And it's actually not bad from the city because it is a very bright nebula. And you can see Running Man starting to form here. You can see some clouds, some dust clouds starting to come through, but that's about as good as you can get from within the city. This is from a dark site. I believe this is probably from Long Su. And this is only after about 20 minutes of data, and the previous was also about half an hour worth of data. So you can see a lot of things. You can see a hell of a lot more stars, more dust clouds here. And this is what the STC narrowband filter will do. So it's pretty impressive. You can see a lot more detail than you could see visibly, for sure. This is about 2 hours worth of data. And what makes it even more impressive is that the moon, the full moon, was 90 degrees away, but it didn't really impair the image itself. This is Horsehead with the Flame Nebula. And this, I believe, is lens flare because the half moon was only 25 degrees away. So this filter might be a little prone to things like lens flaring when you have a really bright object like the moon nearby. And finally, this is the Rosette Nebula. So the filter actually worked beyond my expectations. It really simplifies the process because you only have the camera to worry about. You don't have to worry about a camera that you have to plug into a laptop to collect data. And it also simplifies processing because you only have the one set of data to process, whereas if you do it the conventional way, you might have 2 or 3 sets of data to process before you can recombine them into a color image. And that's really all I wanted to say. I'm kind of a wildlife photographer, and I was after this hummingbird picture for a long time because hummingbirds are really hard to photograph. They're very quick, and their eyesight is very keen, and they're very shy. So I managed to catch this picture this summer. Thanks very much. And questions, please.
Jim.
Yes, Jim, how do you discern the colors from the H alpha and the S2 separately, or can you? Because some people want to know where the H alpha is in an object. Where they're both there simultaneously, how do you know which is which?
In the nebula itself, you mean? Yeah. I guess if from experience, you would know what colors a nebula would produce. But you know, the HA will automatically register on the red pixels on a camera, and then the O3 would be mixed in with the blue and green. So the color sort of happens by itself because you've got a color camera receptive to receiving color of a sort.
So when you process it, what do you Photoshop or what are you processing?
You just process it like a color picture, and you can adjust the color a little bit here,
okay.
you know. But yeah, that's where the artistic part comes in, where you choose what you feel is the proper color levels.
I noticed in your rosette image that the stars appeared to be surrounded by dark halos. Is that a feature of the filter, or is that just hasty processing?
Probably not enough data. Yeah, I had a lot of noise, so I had to use a lot of noise suppression to clean up the image. So if I had more time, that was probably only about 90 minutes worth of exposure. But if you collected several hours worth, then you'd have a better image with less noise, and probably those halos would go away as well.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, Blake.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for that. Have you sent a letter to the U.S. company asking them that you'd like to test their filter?
I don't know what they'd say. I might.
Any more questions? Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. I'm glad I got here. It only took me 2 hours to get here tonight. I drive a stick shift. I'd never left, once I got into 401, I never got it out of second gear until I got off on Leslie Street. Then I got up to fourth. So anyway, glad I got here and managed to hear most of the presentations other than Frisky this month. Just a quick comment from in reply to Ed's presentation. Owen Sound Transportation is very eager to have us go back on board the Cheecham next summer, and they may want some more weekends, in which case we will be looking for additional people to help out. So once I've had my discussions with them in the new year, we'll put an announcement out calling for volunteers to go up to do the talks. So anyway, we'll see what happens once I've talked with them about the program for next summer. Okay, let's take a look at the program for the next 4 weeks or so. So our next meeting is in 2 weeks' time. That's the 27th of November, and that will be a regular speakers night as well as the annual meeting of the Toronto Centre. Our speaker is Dr. Renee Schlokek from the Dunlap Institute at the University of Toronto. At the time that I put this together, we still hadn't gotten a topic from her, but I understand that she will be giving me a topic very, very soon. So we'll have that up on the website so you can see what she talks about. Okay, 2 weeks after that, or rather just ahead of that, we have a joint meeting with the Royal Canadian Institute on Sunday the 24th of November, and that'll be at the usual spot on the St. George campus of the University of Toronto in the McLeod Auditorium at the Medical Sciences Building. The program is a panel discussion on black holes from speculative to spectacular. They've got a number of speakers lined up, and the moderator is Jesse Rogerson, who many of you know from his time as a student at York University, as well as being on the staff here at the Science Centre. So Jesse's coming in from Ottawa to host that program on the 24th. So that starts at 2 o'clock in the Medical Sciences Building. You do need to register online for that and check on the website for the details on how to get registered. Our next regular meeting after that will be the last one for the year, and that's the Recreational Astronomy Night meeting on the 11th of December. In the program, we have Brian Charnock coming back to do the sky this month. A new speaker, Sneha Shirsat, will be talking about astrobiology rendezvous in France. And then Michael Watson will be talking about astrophotography down under with a defective mount. That's going to be intriguing, particularly if you are on the RASC Rascals email list. You'll have seen that Michael's been processing his images from that trip like crazy. And for a defective mount, he's got some really wonderful images. I'd hate to see what he could do with a real good mount. Of course, with defective mounts, well, at least he wasn't tempted to throw it away. So anyhow, we'll look forward to seeing that particular presentation. Okay, regular observing. We have solar observing. The next session will be on December the 7th at from 10 o'clock in the morning until 12 noon out on the telescape. And in the usual way, Sean will be giving us a go or a no-go either late Friday evening or first thing on Saturday morning. Our other regular presentations, we have the Dark Sky Star Party, first clear night of the 25th to the 28th of November at Long Sioux Conservation Area, and the exception will be the Wednesday night, which is the meeting, so there won't be any thing going on that night, but one of the other three hopefully will be clear. And then the following week, from the 2nd to the 5th of December, we'll have the regular City Star Party at Bayview Village Park. And again, with both of these, we have our usual go or no-go announcements as well. We also have the third of our evening stargazing nights here at the Science Centre on the Saturday nights. And this will be on the evening of the 7th of December as well, from 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock. And this is to give the visitors at the Science Centre a last look at something before they head home. Science Centre closes at, I think it's 7 o'clock or so, and so we're right there out on the front as they're leaving. and hopefully we'll get some clear sky for this particular event. We could use about 4 to 6 telescopes if you can help out. The Science Center does have a couple of telescopes here, so that if you don't have a scope and would like to help out, we can certainly fly the Dobsonians that they have out in front. Okay, Blake is our volunteer coordinator, and there's lots of things to volunteer for. We can use a lot of help for running all of our programs, so if you want to help out, please talk to Blake about that. The road to the CAO is snowbound. Last weekend we hosted a scout group up there, and luckily Phil Chou with his pickup truck managed to blast through the snow. There's more snow coming down tonight, so I don't know whether as of this weekend the road is going to be passable. I guess we'll find out in the next 24 hours or so. But again, we do have our arrangements, so if you want to use the place, there's no supervisor now, but you can pick up keys and go up there and make a reservation for both the CAO and for using the SLO as well for imaging. And you just have to remember to park at the top of the hill in the usual spot for winter parking. Speaking of the CAO, one of our my own dome lots has come available, and so if anybody would like to look at using one of these SkyShed pods to set up equipment on the property for a semi-permanent observatory arrangement, that's available now. The pod itself is available for sale, and the member who was occupying this is also offering his equipment for sale as well. And if you're interested in either the pod or the equipment, you can talk to Blake. A reminder also that we do have a lot of equipment that's available for loan with the telescope loan program. And again, our telescope loan coordinators can fit you up with these telescopes for a couple of weeks at a time. And finally, the meeting after the meeting. Despite the snow, a few of us will head over to the Granite at Mount Pleasant and Eglinton, and we'll see how things go. Tom?
Evening, folks. I'm Tom. I'm the club secretary, and a couple of items of business. First of all, we have a council meeting coming next Wednesday at York University. Members are welcome to attend. Full details are on the forum. Second, this is the final call for anyone who would like to stand for election in at the annual meeting. Please see me afterwards if you would like to submit your name. And I believe that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. The other thing is that we still have some observers calendars for sale, $15 a pop, if you would like to get some. Okay. Any other announcements? Good and welfare? If not, thank you for coming tonight. Have a safe trip home. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.